ጩራ 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 ወይኔ ጩራ ጩራ ወይኔ ታሪክ ከዘርቱ ባዕድሎ ኩሉ ግዜ ስዕረት ይኣምሎ እውቀትን በርስኒ ዘይርክቦ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ሕልሚ ሽዋግብ ባድሜ ኣይፈለጡን ጅግንነት ዓጋሜ ዓቕሊ ጽበት ተመዶ ፈንጠርጥር ኣይምድስን ኣብ ሃዮ ተፈልፈል ከመይ ነይሩ ውዕሎ ዛላበሳ ኣይነግረካን የብሉን ብነፃ ታፋሊዶም ዝመቱ ብሽረይ ኣብ ክንደኦም ኣነየ ሓፊረ ሕሉፍ ታሪክ ከሰንቱ ውዕድሎ ኩሉ ግዜ ስዕረት ይኣምሎ እወትን በርስኒ ዘይርክቦ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ሎሚ የለን ከምቲ ናይ ትማሊ ሓይሊ የለን ንዓና ዝፈልፊ እንተበሉ ካብ ኣዲስ ኣስመራ ዳይመራይ መፅሒ ስምራ ኣይድርገሞ ናይ ትማሊ ሰውራ መቕሰብ የለን ትርፎ ክሳራ ተበራበር መንእሰይ ኤሪትራ ተበራበር ሓፋሽ ናይ ኤሪትራ ሕሉፍ ታሪክ ከስንቱ ውዕድሎ ኩሉ ግዜ ስዕረት ይኣምሎ እወትን በርስኒ ዘይርክቦ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ታሪክ ደርጊ እንታይ ከም ዝመስል ኣዘክሮም ናይ ሓየሎም ፈንቅል የማን ፀጋም ንድሕሪት ተመለስ ኣዘክሮም ንቑርዒዳ መለስ ሕጊ ምኽባር ናይ ትግራይ መረፃ ናይ ፋሽስቲ ኩናት እዩ ምርጫ ደማስሶም ብቃልሲ ቆረፃ ድሕሪ ደጊም እንታይ ከየድምፃ ሕሉፍ ታሪክ ከዘንቱ ውዕድሎ ኩሉ ግዜ ስዕረት ይኣምሎ እወትን በርስኒ ዘይርክቦ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ብምዕራብ ሸነኽቲ ናይ ሕሙራ ድራር እለት ቀደምና ኣሞራ ንወረርታ መቓብር ብሒራ ኣዲ ትግራይ ሎሚ ተበሲራ ሓሳብ ጉያ ህጅማ ንምቐለ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ሓሪኑ ተላዕለ ኣብያት ጽንዓት ብሓቂ ትነብር ብሒንዎም ብጣን ተሰንሰለት ሕሉፍ ታሪክ ከዘንቱ ውዕድሎ ኩሉ ግዜ ስዕረት ይኣምሎ እወትን በርስኒ ዘይርክቦ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ሕሉፍ ታሪክ ከዘንቱ ውዕድሎ ኩሉ ግዜ ስዕረት ይኣምሎ እወትን በርስኒ ዘይርክቦ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ኣብ መጽሓፍ ትግራዋይ ይርከቡ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ተመሳሳይ ንመንነቱ ተዓዋታይ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ተመሳሳይ ንመንነቱ ተዓዋታይ كما كم زلوا تدفي هاي العالم
Strikes against the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front are increasing, and so is the humanitarian cost. After 11 months of conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region, millions of people are displaced and nearly 500,000 are facing famine-like conditions. So how can aid agencies ease the crisis? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashim Ahalbarra. It's been described as the world's worst hunger crisis in a decade, and it's feared the situation in Ethiopia's northern region of Tigray will become even more bleak. The UN has suspended all humanitarian flights to the region's capital, Mekelle. That's after an Ethiopian government airstrike forced a UN aid flight to abort a landing in midair. Federal forces have carried out several raids on the city since Monday, targeting what they say is a base in Mekelle that's used as a training site by Tigray rebels. It's part of an offensive by the Ethiopian government to push back the fighters. The Tigray People's Liberation Front, or the TPLF, has taken back large parts of the region from government forces in recent months. It's also seized territory in the neighboring Amhara region. The government and allied armed groups are trying to recover those areas. Both sides of the conflict are accused of committing atrocities. Ethiopian federal government forces and Tigray rebels have been fighting for almost a year. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops to the region in November after accusing the TPLF fighters of attacking a military base. The TPLF has long dominated Ethiopian politics but has been at odds with Prime Minister Abiy over reforms. The conflict has killed thousands of people and displaced more than 2 million. It's also affected Abiy's relations with the US, that's a major source of aid to Ethiopia. The government's relationship with the UN also remains tense. Last month, 7 humanitarian officials were expelled, accused of meddling with its affairs and sympathizing with the rebels. The UN has accused the Ethiopian government of imposing what it called a de facto humanitarian blockade on the region. The government says officials have inflated the scale of the crisis. Almost 500,000 people in Tigray are estimated to be facing famine-like conditions. The UN says just 1% of 5 million people in urgent need of aid received some form of food supplies in the first 2 weeks of October. The ongoing airstrikes in Tigray have halted deliveries of much-needed food and medicine to the area. Let's bring in our guests from Addis Ababa. Niamin Zeleki, member of the Global Ethiopian Advocates Nexus. Out of Nairobi is William Davison, senior Ethiopia analyst at the International Crisis Group, and Jan Abing, professor of politics and governance in Africa at Leiden University. Thank you for joining us. Niamin, so there's a humanitarian situation in the Tigray region. The situation is getting worse, and at the time when the UN agencies were trying to deliver much needed help to the people there, the government steps up its military campaign. How do you see the developments on the ground?
Well, I think that line of question has loaded false narratives. The Ethiopian government has done its level best to make sure that the Tigrayan people get humanitarian aid. That's why it allowed many international NGOs, including the various UN agencies, to operate in Tigray freely. So the actual culprit for the restricted aid being delivered, humanitarian aid being delivered in Tigray is the belligerence of the TPLF, which claims to represent the Tigrayan people. It has invaded lands in Amara and Afar, therefore it has hampered the proper delivery of humanitarian aid to Tigrayan people. Now, having said that, even as we speak, aid has reached the Tigrayan people because the Ethiopian government has allowed both flights, UN flights to Mekelle, and also hundreds of trucks. By the way, 428 trucks are missing because the TPLF is using these trucks to wage the war in Afar and Amara regions. So this narrative is
to be able to establish facts on the ground. This is why sometimes you need to have third independent parties operating on the ground. William, the government was informed of the UN flight and the airstrike took place, forcing the plane to return to the capital, to Addis Ababa, leading many to wonder that this could be an attempt by the government to further deter or prevent aid from being delivered to those places.
Well, I mean, that's one interpretation of events. I mean, it's hard for me to know exactly what caused the lack of communication. But I mean, with regards to the overall situation here, the phase of the war we are in is that in June, the Tigray forces resistance essentially forced a withdrawal by the Federal Army from Tigray. Now, 2 weeks later, the Tigray forces went on the offensive. And that was partly because of what they saw as a renewed blockade on Tigray. There was a blockade at the beginning of the war. That means no trade, no aid, and vital services, telecommunications, banking, electricity, were cut off by the federal government. So the Tigray forces went on the offensive to overcome that blockade. They were also trying to weaken the federal military and allies so they no longer presented a threat to Tigray. And they were also trying to reclaim territory lost to Amhara region at the beginning of the war. That is the phase of the war we are in. And there is no doubt that the federal government is placing severe constraints on aid to Tigray, partly to try and maintain this effort to pacify and force the submission of Tigray. The federal government is also worried about aid diversion to the rebels. They are worried about fuel trucks going in, which are vital for humanitarian operations, which could also be used for the armed rebellion. Now, that is the reason why there is such a critical humanitarian situation inside Tigray. But of course, people are also suffering outside of Tigray, in the areas in Amhara and Afar region where the Tigray forces have gone on the offensive to try and achieve those stated objectives.
So, Jan, this is a critical situation from a humanitarian perspective, both in the Tigray region and also neighboring Amhara, where the TPLF has managed to expand its military presence over there. And this was a moment where the UN was sending 2 flights a week to deliver aid to the region. Is the government trying to further step up its military campaign to take over the Tigray region, or is it trying to send a political message to the TPLF?
Both, but the main thing is that they want to get the Tigray forces out of the Amhara and Afar region, which, as William says, have been invaded after the unilateral ceasefire of 28 June. The TPLF had no real business to go to these areas, except for expanding the war indefinitely and see what it will bring them. It has not brought them anything except more misery for both the Amhara and Afar population as well as their own population. Because in this war situation, of course, all kinds of aid, transports, convoys to any region in the fighting line is checked in terms of security and smuggling and so forth, which has hit, of course, the Tigray region in dire need of aid, but also the Amhara region. So we have come to the point that we don't know what the end game of the TPLF is. What do they want? I think I agree with both my previous speakers that TPLF is here the region which has unnecessarily aggravated and dramatized this conflict in a manner which serves no political, military, or humanitarian purpose.
Yeah, but then let me go to Niamey. The Prime Minister Abiy